Welcome back. So in the last video we took our concept sculpt and we did retopology using z-spheres to get our lower version of this but a sharper version, and what we're going to cover in this video is dynamic subdivision and Zmodeler and using the slice curve to get some panel lines, and in the end going back into Dynamesh and starting to sculpt in some of the last bit of kind of tertiary detail to get the desired look that we want. So right now we're going to just take a look at the retopoed mesh. It already has some crease lines on there. You might notice if we subdivide it that you'll see the hard edges, but it's not everywhere we want. That is just from the generation of this mesh after retopology. The rest is very soft, and we want to sharpen all the edges and corners, and we're going to use that with dynamic subdivision. So in the dynamic subdiv panel, we're going to click on dynamic. Now what this does is it basically subdivides our model without destroying it. Think of it like a turbo smooth in 3D Studio Max, where you can kind of go back and forth between the low poly version and the subdivided one. It allows you to edit the low poly and see the results on the high poly. The smooth subdiv slider will let you change the density. So obviously the higher you drag it, the more polygons. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at our low poly mesh and figure out where we want to have the crease lines. And we're going to achieve the crease lines by using the Zmodeler brush. Let's come over to brush. Down the bottom you'll see Zmodeler. Now Zmodeler is basically a modeling program, a polygon modeling program in ZBrush. It was added a little while ago, and it's actually become a good asset for, you can almost completely model in this thing. So it's context sensitive, so when you hover over a face, an edge, or a vertice, you'll get a contextual menu. You can see right now, hovering over a face, it says Q Mesh Poly. But hovering over edge, it says Insert Edge Loop. And by clicking on that, you just drag a line in. Now you can change all the contextual functions. So right now, hovering over a vertice will allow you to move it. That's its current function. And on the edge, if you click on the space bar, you can see the actions for the edge, and you can just click on the one that you want to do. So what we want to use is crease. And under the target, you can select whether you want a full loop or just one edge or a partial loop. Right now, we're just going to keep it at edge. So now you'll see that when you hover over the edge, it says crease instead of insert loop. So when you click it, now we zoom in and we can see that there is now a creased edge line. So going back to the subdivision, you can see now it kind of pinches because we're actually starting to make that line hard. So now we're just going to go through and crease some of the edges that we want, some of the corners. You'll notice that sometimes it's easier to drop back into the low poly model to do the creases. You can do it on the higher subdivision levels. So if you need to get a more precise selection, you can drop back into the low poly version and crease the edges. Sometimes it's actually hard to select the edge in general once it's subdivided. So here we're continuing to crease the lines and figuring out which shape, in which direction we want the creases to go. And it's just a rinse and repeat type thing, you know, just go in, crease the edges, click the dynamic subdivision button and see the results and go back. You can also uncrease by holding the Alt. So I'm just playing around, just figuring out what angles and where I want the hard lines to be. Not exactly what I want right now, but I'll keep working at it. So I'm just going to uncrease some of these. You don't want it to look too facety like the low poly, so removing the creases that could be causing that is probably what we want to do. So I'm going to use the move on the vertice and bring that edge down. I didn't like that curve that was happening, so the Zmodeler tool is good for that. And here I had to go out of the subdivision so I could highlight those edges. Now I'm going to play around with a little more creasing. I want to make sure I get the corners and everything right. So now we're going to just play around with the Zmodeler. We're going to mess around with the faces. So holding the spacebar over the face brings up the polygon actions. We're going to inset, and we're going to mess around with the modifiers for inset region. So holding Alt will do multiple selections. And just kind of like in 3D Studio Max, we're insetting those polygons. And now we're going to change the inset to extrude. And we're just going to pull out. But it should feel very similar to people who know Maya or 3D Studio Max. And what we're doing is essentially polymodeling. Clicking back into the subdivision, you'll see that it's kind of soft and not what we want, so we have to go back in and sharpen those edges. We still have our crease function selected on the edge, so just going through that and tightening those up. Just going to get in the corners there to make those a little bit sharper. I think that's pretty much where I want it. Now with that finished, we want to do some of the final tertiary details. So we're going to turn this back into a Dynamesh. So before we do that, we have to hit apply on the dynamic subdivision because that makes it, finalizes it. It's almost like collapsing the stack. So now we're going to go into Dynamesh. Change this thing and give it all new topology. I'm going to play around with the resolution a little bit because I want it to be fairly high, so we can put these high details in there. So whatever number is there, 2832, a little bit too low. So I'm going to go all the way up to the top. We're going to polish it a little bit, polish crisp edges under the deformation tab. That'll help smooth it out and sharpen the edges a little more. Now I didn't do it in this video, I kind of stayed at the 222,000, but you could subdivide after you've Dynameshed, continue to subdivide after it, take it out of Dynamesh. Now that we actually have topology that is more suitable for sculpting. So I'm just coming in with some alphas right now, making some like vent ports or something. The rectangle, drag rectangle tool with some circle alphas. I'm just going to play around with some design. I don't even really know what the plan is right now. This is the part where you can get more detail. You can start to block in some damage now. The model it's crisp and clean, and it should have enough geometry in there to do some of the sculpting that you want if you want to do scratches or damage. So I'm just playing around with some different alphas to get some kind of look. From here I'm going to maybe try to do like a breathing vent or something. So I'm going to kind of mask out an area. So I kind of inset that thing using a mask and redynameshed. Then you can go in here and use other hard surface tools. You could use the clipping brush, clip curve. You could also do the H polish, trim dynamic. Now you're in this more of a sculpting phase, so you can kind of tighten up other areas, do some other detail. So right now I'm just trying to put in some other interesting elements to it. Now, technically, that you're in Dynamesh, you could do other things like use insert spheres, insert rings, or insert cubes. You can do all the cool functions that you can do with Dynamesh now on this, which is the slice brush, the slice curve brush. And what that's going to do is literally slice the mesh into different pieces. So on the Dynamesh, you make sure that the groups are selected. And then what you need to do is double tap the Alt to make a sharp curve or a sharp 90-degree line. And then when you read Dynamesh, with the group selected, they will become two different polygroups. And then once that happens, you can come in and you can use the smooth and just very lightly go across it. And you'll give the impression of panel lines. If you smooth too much, it's going to get really soft, so just probably turn the intensity down and just lightly go there, and it will feel like this separation of panels. Now if you redynamesh it again, it might all weld together unless you have the group selected still, so this is kind of like a final pass here. So again, I'm going to come in with the slice curve brush and then redynamesh with the groups on. And then come in lightly with smoothing to kind of separate those. So it's a really fast way to get panel lines. this is pretty much the end of it. You can come in now and probably go back to your concept sculpt and start to smush that stuff back in. So you can see your other piece now, because we don't need that anymore. Still destroying that concept mesh underneath, and really repeat this process for all the other parts. So use your Z-spheres to do retopology, make a new piece from it, and then use dynamic subdivision to do any other extra modeling or edge creasing, and then changing it back to a Dynamesh so you can do other sculpting, kind of the tertiary details. And right now I'm just kind of resizing it. These things happen as you kind of work. So, it's not really impactful here. But, with some time, you can get a really nice looking piece. You can start making battle damage and stuff. So I would just say continue on, and I hope this video was helpful.